3 men in police uniforms surround me on my own front porch, badges gleaming, handcuffs ready. One of them steps forward with what looks like an official arrest warrant. "You are under arrest for interfering with HOA enforcement operations," he announces with authority that would fool anyone. But I am not anyone. I am a corrections officer with 15 years of experience. I run the county jail where real criminals go. And these three, they are about to make the biggest mistake of their lives. As they slap the handcuffs on my wrists, I make a choice that will change everything. I decide to play along. Because sometimes, the best way to catch fake cops is to let them think they have won. What they did not know was simple. They were not arresting me. They were walking straight into my trap. My name is David, and for 15 years I have worked as a corrections officer at our county jail. I have seen every type of criminal walk through those doors. Drug dealers, thieves, con artists, violent offenders. I know what real authority looks like, and more importantly, I know what fake authority looks like too. After my divorce 3 years ago, I bought a small house in Maple Grove Estates. Nothing fancy, just a quiet suburban neighborhood where I could rebuild my life. The kind of place where neighbors wave from their driveways and kids ride bikes in the street. I loved my morning coffee on the front porch, watching the sunrise paint the sky orange and pink. Weekends meant working in my small garden, maybe grilling burgers in the backyard. For the first 2 years, life was exactly what I needed. Peaceful, simple, normal. Then Marcus Webb moved in. It started small. Official-looking notices began appearing on front doors throughout the neighborhood. Thick white paper with formal letterhead that read Maple Grove Estates Homeowners Association. The language was bureaucratic and intimidating. Words like compliance, violations, and enforcement actions. I remember standing on my porch that first Tuesday morning, reading the notice taped to my door. According to this document, I was in violation of Section 4.2b of the HOA landscaping guidelines because my garden gnome was not aesthetically consistent with neighborhood standards. I laughed out loud. A garden gnome violation. In all my years dealing with actual criminals, this felt like a joke. But my neighbors were not laughing. Mrs. Patterson, the sweet elderly woman who lived next door, came over with tears in her eyes. She held a similar notice demanding she remove her bird feeders or face a $50 fine. "David, I have lived here for 12 years, she said, her voice shaking. "Nobody ever told me I needed permission for bird feeders." That was when I realized this was not a joke. Someone was using official-looking documents to intimidate my neighbors. Someone was collecting money through fear and fake authority. I decided to do what any good corrections officer would do. I started investigating. The first red flag was obvious. There had never been an HOA in Maple Grove Estates. I checked the county records, the property deeds, even the original neighborhood development plans. No homeowners association existed. No legal filing. No elected board. No legitimate authority whatsoever. The second red flag was Marcus Webb himself. A smooth-talking man in his 40s who had moved into the biggest house on Elm Street 6 months earlier. He drove an expensive black SUV and wore expensive suits even on weekends. He always carried a leather briefcase and spoke in the kind of corporate language that made simple things sound complicated. But when I ran his name through our database at work, the picture became clear. Marcus Webb was a convicted con artist with 3 previous fraud charges. He had used 5 different names over the past decade, always targeting suburban communities, always using fake authority to steal money from honest people. The third red flag was his enforcement team. Two unemployed brothers named Jake and Tommy, who suddenly started walking around the neighborhood in security uniforms. They carried clipboards, took photos of houses, and spoke to residents like they had real power. Within weeks, the fake HOA was issuing citations for everything: grass too tall, wrong mailbox color, cars parked in driveways instead of garages, decorations that were non-compliant. Each violation came with a fine ranging from $50 to $500. And people were paying. Fear is a powerful motivator, especially when the paperwork looks official and the enforcers act like they have authority. I tried warning my neighbors, but most were too scared to listen. They had received official notices. Men in uniforms had come to their doors. It looked real enough to be real. That was Marcus Webb's genius. He understood that most people would rather pay a small fine than fight what appeared to be legitimate authority. He preyed on good people who respected rules and feared confrontation. But he made one crucial mistake. He decided to target a corrections officer who understood exactly how real authority worked. My investigation into Marcus Webb revealed a sophisticated operation built on lies and intimidation. Every morning before my shift at the jail, I would drive through the neighborhood documenting their activities. Every evening after work, I would research their background and methods. Marcus had created an entire fake infrastructure: official letterhead, stamped documents, a website with professional photos and legal-sounding policies. He even had business cards that listed him as Community Standards Director. The level of detail was impressive for a scam operation. But the more I dug, the darker it became. Jake and Tommy, the brothers Marcus recruited as enforcers, were not just unemployed. They were both convicted felons with records for assault and theft. Marcus was using criminals to intimidate law-abiding citizens while pretending to represent community safety. Their target selection was calculated and cruel. They focused on elderly residents, young families with children, and anyone who seemed unlikely to fight back. Mrs. Patterson received 4 separate citations in 2 weeks. The young couple with twin toddlers was fined for having a swing set that was improperly positioned. An elderly man with mobility issues was cited for not mowing his lawn frequently enough. The financial scope was staggering. I estimated they were collecting between $2,000 and $3,000 per week in fake fines. Over the course of 3 months, they had stolen approximately $30,000 from my neighbors. But the money was not the worst part. The worst part was watching good people live in fear in their own homes. Mrs. Patterson stopped putting out bird feeders. She loved watching cardinals and blue jays during breakfast, but the fake HOA had convinced her that feeding birds was against the rules. The joy was gone from her morning routine. The family with twins removed their children's outdoor toys every evening, terrified of receiving another citation. Those kids went from playing freely in their own yard to being restricted to a small corner behind the house. I watched my neighborhood transform from a place of comfort into a place of anxiety. People checked their mailboxes with dread. Neighbors stopped talking to each other, afraid that socializing might somehow be against the rules too. That was when Marcus Webb made his biggest mistake. He decided to target me directly. The citation arrived on a Thursday morning. According to the official-looking document, my police academy memorabilia displayed in my front window was considered intimidating decoration that violated neighborhood standards. The fine was $200, payable within 7 days. I stared at that notice for a long time. My police academy certificate, my commendation letters, and my service awards were somehow intimidating. The irony was perfect. A fake authority figure was intimidated by symbols of real authority. But Marcus was not done. He recruited a third enforcer, a man named Rick who posed as a code enforcement officer with fake credentials and a clipboard full of violation forms. Rick wore an official-looking uniform and carried what appeared to be government identification. Their boldness grew with their success. They began conducting inspections of properties, walking through yards without permission and taking photographs. They left notices demanding access to garages and basements to check for safety violations. The breaking point came on a Saturday morning in October. I was drinking coffee on my front porch when I heard shouting from next door. Through Mrs. Patterson's front window, I could see 3 men in uniform surrounding her in her own living room. She was crying and pointing at papers they had spread across her kitchen table. I walked over and knocked on her door. Jake answered, blocking the doorway with his body. "This is official HOA business," he said. "You need to leave." "No, I do not," I replied calmly. "Mrs. Patterson, are you okay?" Her voice came from inside the house, shaky and frightened. "They say I owe $800 in fines. They want to inspect my basement for violations." That was when I knew the situation had crossed from fraud into something much more serious. They were not just stealing money anymore. They were terrorizing an elderly woman in her own home. I pushed past Jake and walked into Mrs. Patterson's living room. Marcus Webb stood there in a fake security uniform, surrounded by official-looking paperwork. His expression changed when he saw me. "You need to leave immediately," Marcus said, his voice carrying fake authority. "This is an official investigation." "Investigation of what?" I asked. "Multiple HOA violations, failure to comply with community standards, refusal to pay assessed fines." I looked at the papers on Mrs. Patterson's table. Fake invoices, fake legal notices, fake enforcement documents, all designed to look official enough to fool someone who did not know better. "Mrs. Patterson, you do not owe these people anything," I said clearly. "This is not a real HOA. These are not real fines. These men have no authority in this neighborhood." Marcus Webb's face turned red with anger. "You are interfering with official business. That is going to be a problem for you." I smiled at him. After 15 years of dealing with actual criminals, his threat felt like a gentle breeze. "Bring it on," I said. Marcus Webb did not waste time making good on his threat. The very next week, his operation escalated to a level that crossed every legal and ethical boundary I could imagine. Rick, the fake code enforcement officer, began showing up at houses with what appeared to be official inspection orders. He wore a uniform that looked legitimate enough to fool anyone who had never seen a real code enforcement officer. He carried fake identification, official-looking clipboards, and even had magnetic signs for his car that read Municipal Code Enforcement. But it was not just the fake credentials that made him dangerous. It was his methods. I watched from my living room window as Rick approached the Martinez family's house on Tuesday morning. He did not knock on the front door like a legitimate inspector would. Instead, he walked directly into their backyard without permission, taking photographs and making notes on his clipboard. When Mr. Martinez came outside to ask what was happening, Rick handed him an official-looking document that claimed the family was in violation of municipal safety codes and owed an immediate fine of $300. The document was completely fake, but it looked real enough to terrify a family who had immigrated from El Salvador 5 years earlier. They were naturally cautious about anything involving government authority, which made them perfect targets for Marcus Webb's operation. I knew I had to act, but I also knew I needed evidence. As a corrections officer, I understood that exposing their crimes would require more than just my word against theirs. I needed documentation, witnesses, and proof that would hold up in a real courtroom. That Wednesday morning, I got my chance. I was leaving for work when I heard loud voices coming from Mrs. Patterson's house again. This time, all three fake enforcers were there. Marcus, Jake, Tommy, and Rick had surrounded her house like they were conducting some kind of raid. Through her front window, I could see Mrs. Patterson standing in her kitchen, looking absolutely terrified. Marcus was pointing at documents spread across her table, while Jake and Tommy stood on either side of her like bodyguards. I walked over and knocked on the door. Tommy answered, his chest puffed out like he was some kind of tough guy. "This is official HOA business," he said, using the same script they always used. "You cannot enter." "Step aside," I said calmly. "I am checking on my neighbor." "You need to leave immediately, or you will be arrested for interfering with enforcement operations." I almost laughed. A convicted felon was threatening to arrest a corrections officer for checking on an elderly woman. The irony was incredible. I pushed past Tommy and walked into Mrs. Patterson's living room. The scene was even worse than I had imagined. They had spread dozens of fake documents across her furniture. Fake violation notices, fake legal summons, fake court orders, all designed to convince her that she was in serious legal trouble. Mrs. Patterson looked at me with tears in her eyes. "David, they say I owe $2,000 in fines and fees. They say if I do not pay by Friday, they will have me arrested." That was the moment everything changed for me. These criminals were not just stealing money anymore. They were terrorizing a sweet elderly woman who had never hurt anyone in her life. They were using fear tactics that could literally give her a heart attack. Marcus Webb stood up from the kitchen table, his fake authority mask slipping for just a moment. I could see the real person underneath. Not a community standards director, not an HOA representative, just a common criminal who preyed on vulnerable people. "You need to leave right now," Marcus said, his voice carrying a threatening tone. "This is your final warning." "Or what?" I asked. "Or you will regret interfering with official HOA business." I looked him directly in the eyes. Marcus Webb, born April 15, 1978. 3 previous fraud convictions under the names Michael Weber, Mark Weber, and Martin Webb. Currently wanted in Arizona for running a fake charity scam. Should I continue? The room went completely silent. Marcus's face turned white as he realized I knew exactly who he was. "You have no idea what you are getting yourself into," he said quietly. "Actually, I know exactly what I am getting into. The question is, do you?" That evening, I sat on my front porch making detailed notes about everything I had witnessed. I photographed the fake documents they had left behind. I recorded Mrs. Patterson's statement about their threats. I compiled everything I knew about Marcus Webb's criminal history. But I also knew they would not back down easily. Criminals like Marcus Webb do not surrender when confronted. They escalate. They double down. They make bigger and more dangerous mistakes. I was right. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of car doors slamming in my driveway. I looked out my bedroom window and saw something that made my blood run cold. 3 men in full police uniforms were walking toward my front door. They had badges, utility belts, radios, and handcuffs. They looked like legitimate law enforcement officers. But I knew better. Marcus Webb and his crew were about to cross the line from fraud into impersonating police officers. They were about to commit a felony that would send them to the same jail where I worked every day. As they knocked on my door, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of confronting them, I would let them dig their own graves. Sometimes the best way to catch criminals is to give them enough rope to hang themselves. I walked to the front door, took a deep breath, and prepared to play the most dangerous game of my career. When I opened my front door that Thursday morning, I was face to face with three men in complete police uniforms. Not security guard uniforms or fake HOA enforcement costumes. Full police regalia that would fool anyone who did not know better. Marcus Webb stood in the center, wearing sergeant stripes and a badge that looked identical to our local police department's design. Jake and Tommy flanked him on either side, dressed as patrol officers with utility belts containing handcuffs, pepper spray, and what appeared to be service weapons. Behind them in my driveway sat a white sedan with magnetic police decals, emergency lights, and even a partition between the front and back seats. The attention to detail was stunning and terrifying at the same time. Marcus stepped forward with a document in his hand. "David Morrison, you are under arrest for interfering with HOA enforcement operations, harassment of official personnel, and obstruction of Community Standards Administration." The absurdity of the charges was almost comical, but the situation was deadly serious. These criminals were impersonating police officers, which is a felony in every state. They were about to kidnap me under the pretense of a lawful arrest. In any other circumstance, I would have ended this immediately. But I realized something important. This was my chance to gather evidence that would put them in prison for years instead of months. If I played along, I could document their entire operation from the inside. I reached into my pocket and activated the voice recording app on my phone, then slipped it back into my pocket with the microphone facing outward. Whatever happened next, I would have audio evidence of everything they said and did. "You have the right to remain silent," Jake began, clearly reading from a script. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law administered by the Maple Grove Estates HOA Tribunal." Even their Miranda rights were fake. A real police officer would never mention an HOA tribunal as a court of law. But to someone who did not understand the legal system, it might sound legitimate enough. They handcuffed me with real metal restraints, not the plastic zip ties I might have expected from amateurs. Marcus had invested serious money in making this operation look authentic. As they walked me to their fake patrol car, I noticed neighbors watching from their windows. Mrs. Patterson looked horrified. The Martinez family stood on their front porch looking confused and frightened. To them, it appeared that the neighborhood troublemaker was finally being arrested by legitimate police officers. The fake patrol car even smelled like a real police vehicle. Marcus had thought of everything. Vinyl seats, a radio that crackled with what sounded like police chatter, even air fresheners that masked any new car smell. Tommy sat in the back seat next to me while Marcus drove and Jake rode in the passenger seat. They maintained their police officer personas perfectly, using law enforcement terminology and speaking in the clipped, professional tone that real cops use. "Where are you taking me?" I asked. "Central Processing Facility," Marcus replied. "You will be booked, fingerprinted, and held pending a hearing with the HOA Enforcement Tribunal." Central Processing Facility. Even their language was designed to sound official and intimidating. The drive took about 10 minutes, ending at a large garage behind Marcus's house on Elm Street. But when they opened the overhead door, I was shocked by what I saw inside. Marcus had converted his three-car garage into a complete mock police station. There were desks with computers, filing cabinets full of fake documentation, a fingerprinting station with real equipment, and even a backdrop for taking booking photos. In the corner, he had constructed what looked like a holding cell with metal bars and a bench. The level of investment was staggering. This was not some amateur scam thrown together over a weekend. Marcus had spent thousands of dollars creating a facility that could fool anyone who had never been inside a real police station. "Welcome to Central Processing," Marcus said as they removed my handcuffs. "You will be here until your hearing, which is scheduled for Monday morning. Your bail has been set at $2,000, payable in cash only." $2,000, the same amount they had tried to extort from Mrs. Patterson. They photographed me holding a booking number placard. They took my fingerprints using real police equipment. They even gave me an orange jumpsuit to wear and took my personal belongings, cataloging everything on official-looking forms. But the most shocking discovery came when Jake opened one of the filing cabinets. Inside were dozens of similar booking photos and processing documents, other neighbors, other victims, people I recognized from around the neighborhood, all looking terrified and confused in their orange jumpsuits. Mrs. Patterson was there, the Martinez family, the young couple with twins, even teenagers whose only crime was skateboarding in the street. Marcus had been arresting and extorting people for months, and nobody had reported it because they believed it was legitimate. The fake holding cell was equipped with a bench, a small sink, and even a toilet. Marcus locked me inside and handed me a phone connected to the wall. "You get one phone call," he said. "You can call a lawyer or you can call someone to bring your bail money. But understand this. If you try to contact real police or cause any problems, your charges will be upgraded and your bail will increase to $5,000. As I sat in that fake jail cell, I realized the full scope of their operation. They were not just running an HOA scam. They were operating a kidnapping and extortion ring disguised as law enforcement. They were holding people prisoner until their families paid ransom money disguised as bail and fines. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had arrested someone who understood the real criminal justice system, someone who knew the difference between legitimate law enforcement and elaborate theater, someone who worked at the actual jail, where they would soon be spending their own time. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. Not a lawyer, not a family member to bring bail money. I called Detective Sarah Chen at the county sheriff's department, a friend who had worked with our jail for years. "Sarah, this is David Morrison from County Corrections," I said quietly. "I need you to listen very carefully. I am currently being held prisoner by 3 men impersonating police officers, and I need you to coordinate a response that will put them away for a very long time." Marcus Webb thought he was running the perfect crime. What he did not know was that he had just handed me everything I needed to destroy him. Detective Sarah Chen listened in stunned silence as I quietly explained my situation over the fake jail phone. After 15 years of working together, she knew I was not someone who exaggerated or wasted her time. When I told her I was being held prisoner by fake police officers in a mock jail facility, she took immediate action. "David, are you in immediate physical danger?" she asked. "No, but they have kidnapped and extorted multiple neighbors over the past several months. This is a major operation, not just a simple fraud case. Can you keep playing along safely while we coordinate a response?" I looked around the fake holding cell, listening to Marcus and his crew talking in the next room about processing procedures and tribunal schedules. They were completely convinced they had fooled me. Yes, but Sarah, I want to do this right. These guys are not just stealing money. They are terrorizing an entire neighborhood by impersonating law enforcement. I want charges that will put them away for years, not months. What do you need from me? That was when I outlined the plan that would turn Marcus Webb's own operation against him. Over the next 2 hours, while pretending to wait for bail money, I worked with Sarah to coordinate the perfect sting operation. She contacted her supervisor, who contacted the district attorney's office, who immediately recognized the serious nature of the charges we were building. Impersonating a police officer is a felony that carries up to 5 years in prison. Kidnapping under the pretense of arrest adds another 10 years. Extortion, fraud, and operating a criminal enterprise could add even more time. We were not talking about misdemeanor charges anymore. We were building a case that would destroy Marcus Webb's life. But more importantly, we were building a case that would help every victim in the neighborhood. Sarah began documenting everything I reported over the phone. She verified the identities of Marcus Webb, Jake, and Tommy through criminal databases. She confirmed that none of them had any connection to legitimate law enforcement. She even discovered that the fake patrol car was a stolen vehicle that Marcus had modified with police equipment. The evidence was overwhelming, but we needed more than just my testimony. We needed to catch them in the act of impersonating officers while trying to arrest additional victims. That was when I suggested the perfect trap. Our county jail operates a 24-hour emergency communication system for law enforcement agencies throughout the region. We can monitor police radio traffic, coordinate prisoner transfers, and respond to officer assistance calls. What if Marcus and his crew received an emergency call requesting immediate law enforcement response to the jail facility? What if they believed fellow officers were in distress and needed backup? What if their own fake police identities compelled them to respond to what appeared to be a legitimate emergency? Sarah loved the idea, but she wanted to make sure we could execute it safely. David, if they show up at the jail in those fake uniforms, my officers will be waiting. But I need you to be somewhere safe when this goes down. I will handle getting out of here. Just make sure you have enough people to arrest all 3 of them simultaneously. These guys are dangerous and they might try to run. That afternoon, Marcus returned to check on me in the fake holding cell. He was carrying paperwork that looked like court documents. "Your tribunal hearing has been moved to tomorrow morning," he said. "Your bail remains at $2,000. Has anyone contacted you about payment?" "My sister is trying to get the money together," I lied. "She should have it by this evening." Marcus nodded, satisfied that his extortion was working. "Good. The sooner you pay, the sooner this can be resolved quietly. But remember, if you try to involve outside law enforcement, the charges will be upgraded and the bail will increase." After he left, I used the phone to call Sarah again. "The trap is set for tonight," she confirmed. "We will broadcast an officer assistance call on the frequency they have been monitoring. Something about a disturbance at the county jail requiring immediate backup response." "What kind of disturbance?" "Multiple prisoners attempting to escape. Officers overwhelmed and requesting all available units for immediate assistance." It was perfect. Marcus and his crew would hear the call and feel compelled to respond. Their fake police personas would not allow them to ignore fellow officers in distress. They would race to the jail facility thinking they were heroes coming to help. Instead, they would be driving straight into the hands of real law enforcement officers, who were very interested in meeting them. That evening, around 6 o'clock, Marcus returned with what appeared to be release paperwork. "Your bail has been posted," he announced. "You are free to go, but you must appear at tomorrow morning's tribunal hearing at 9 a.m. sharp. Failure to appear will result in immediate rearrest and forfeiture of bail." He uncuffed me and returned my personal belongings, maintaining the professional demeanor of a real police officer processing a release. The attention to detail was remarkable, but it was also evidence of how seriously he took his criminal impersonation. As I walked out of the fake police station, I felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. Relief that I was free from their custody. Anticipation for what would happen when they received the emergency call. I drove home and parked in my driveway, then called Sarah one final time. "I am clear and safe. You can initiate the operation whenever you are ready. All units are in position. We will broadcast the assistance call in 10 minutes. David, you should probably stay inside tonight. This could get complicated." But I did not stay inside. I sat on my front porch with a cup of coffee, waiting to watch Marcus Webb and his crew make their final mistake. At exactly 8:47 p.m., I heard the sound of sirens in the distance, getting louder as they approached the neighborhood. The fake police officers were racing toward their own arrests, thinking they were heroes responding to an emergency. The sirens grew louder as Marcus Webb's fake patrol car raced through the neighborhood toward the county jail. I could see the flashing emergency lights reflecting off house windows as they passed, still playing their role as heroic police officers responding to help fellow cops in distress. What they did not know was that Detective Sarah Chen had positioned real police officers at every entrance to the jail facility. What they thought was an emergency call for backup was actually the final act of an elaborate sting operation designed to catch them in the most serious crime of their careers. I drove to the jail facility by a back route, arriving just in time to watch the confrontation unfold from the parking lot. Sarah had given me permission to observe from a safe distance, knowing that my testimony would be crucial for the prosecution. Marcus Webb's fake patrol car pulled up to the main entrance with lights flashing and sirens wailing. All three men jumped out in full police uniforms, ready to assist with what they believed was a prisoner escape situation. Marcus approached the front desk with confidence, his sergeant stripes clearly visible on his fake uniform. "Sergeant Webb responding to officer assistance call," he announced to the desk sergeant. "We are here to help with the escape situation." The desk sergeant, who had been briefed on the operation, played his part perfectly. "Thank you for responding so quickly, Sergeant. The situation is in the back processing area. Follow me." Marcus, Jake, and Tommy followed the desk sergeant through the facility, their fake police personas still intact. They carried themselves with the authority of legitimate law enforcement officers, speaking in professional tones and using proper radio protocol. But as they walked deeper into the jail facility, they began to notice something was wrong. There were no escaping prisoners, no signs of disturbance, no emergency situation requiring their assistance. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by real police officers who had been waiting for their arrival. Detective Sarah Chen stepped forward, her badge clearly visible. "Gentlemen, I am Detective Chen with the County Sheriff's Department. You are all under arrest for impersonating police officers, kidnapping, extortion, and operating a criminal enterprise." The moment of realization was devastating to watch. Marcus Webb's confident expression crumbled as he understood that he had been trapped. Jake and Tommy looked around frantically, searching for an escape route that did not exist. "There must be some mistake," Marcus stammered, still trying to maintain his fake authority. "I am Sergeant Webb with the Neighborhood Enforcement Division." "No, Marcus," Sarah replied calmly. "You are a convicted felon with outstanding warrants in 3 states. You have been impersonating police officers, kidnapping residents, and extorting money through fake law enforcement activities." Jake made a desperate attempt to run, but he only made it about 10 feet before real police officers tackled him to the ground. Tommy surrendered immediately, his hands raised above his head. Marcus continued protesting his innocence, even as they placed him in handcuffs. "This is all a misunderstanding. The HOA enforcement activities are completely legitimate. We have proper authorization." Sarah held up a folder full of documents. "Marcus, we have recorded conversations of you threatening residents. We have photographs of your fake police station. We have booking photos of the people you kidnapped. We have financial records showing $30,000 in extorted payments. You also impersonated police officers while responding to an emergency call," she continued. "That alone is a felony that carries a 5-year prison sentence." As they processed the arrests, the full scope of Marcus Webb's operation became clear. Detective Chen had coordinated with multiple agencies to investigate every aspect of their crimes. The fake patrol car was indeed stolen. The police uniforms were purchased from a costume supply company and modified with fake badges. The radio equipment was set to monitor real police frequencies, allowing them to sound authentic during their impersonation. But the most damning evidence was found in Marcus's house. The fake police station contained detailed records of every person they had kidnapped and extorted, booking photos, fingerprints, and financial records that documented months of criminal activity. They had collected over $50,000 in fake fines and bail payments. 43 residents had been victimized. Some elderly residents had paid multiple times, believing they were avoiding criminal prosecution. The psychological impact was even worse than the financial damage. These criminals had terrorized an entire neighborhood by exploiting people's respect for law enforcement authority. As they loaded Marcus Webb into a real police car, he made one final attempt to minimize his crimes. "Look, this was just a neighborhood dispute that got out of hand. Nobody was really hurt. We were just trying to maintain community standards." Sarah looked at him with disgust. "Marcus, you kidnapped elderly people and held them prisoner until their families paid ransom money. You impersonated police officers and terrorized families in their own homes. You stole thousands of dollars from people who trusted what appeared to be legitimate authority. This was not a neighborhood dispute. This was organized crime." Jake and Tommy were processed separately, both immediately confessing and agreeing to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for reduced sentences. They provided detailed statements about Marcus's methods, his financial records, and his plans to expand the operation to other neighborhoods. The evidence was so overwhelming that Marcus's attorney would later advise him to accept a plea deal rather than risk a trial that could result in decades in prison. But the most satisfying moment came when they processed Marcus Webb through the same jail facility where I worked every day. The same booking procedures, the same fingerprinting equipment, the same holding cells. Except this time, everything was real. As I watched them complete his intake paperwork, I realized that justice was not just being served. It was being served with perfect irony. The man who had terrorized my neighborhood by pretending to be a police officer was now experiencing the real criminal justice system from the inside. And unlike his fake operation, This system was designed to actually protect innocent people from criminals like him. The aftermath of Marcus Webb's arrest rippled through Maple Grove estates like a wave of relief and vindication. Within hours of the news spreading, neighbors who had been living in fear for months began coming forward with their own stories of intimidation and extortion. Detective Sarah Chen organized a community meeting at the local library to document victim statements and coordinate the recovery of stolen money. The turnout was remarkable. Nearly 60 residents attended, many bringing their own collections of fake citations, fraudulent legal notices, and documentation of payments they had made to the fake HOA. Mrs. Patterson sat in the front row, her hands shaking as she spoke about the terror she had experienced. "I paid them $400 over 2 months," she said quietly. "I was so scared they would arrest me that I stopped doing things I loved, like feeding the birds in my backyard." The Martinez family described how they had paid $300 after being threatened with deportation if they did not comply with fake municipal codes. The young couple with twins had paid $500 to avoid having their children taken away for unsafe living conditions. Story after story revealed the systematic targeting of vulnerable residents. Marcus Webb had specifically chosen victims who were unlikely to fight back or verify the legitimacy of his authority. The financial recovery process took several weeks, but Detective Chen's team was able to trace most of the stolen money through Marcus's banking records. The district attorney's office worked with victim advocates to return nearly $45,000 to residents who had been extorted. Mrs. Patterson received a check for $400, plus interest and compensation for emotional distress. But more importantly, she received her peace of mind back. Within a week of Marcus's arrest, her bird feeders were back up and her yard was full of cardinals and blue jays again. The Martinez family not only recovered their $300, but also received assistance from immigration advocates who helped them understand their actual rights and protections. The fear that had controlled their daily lives was replaced with confidence in the real legal system. The criminal proceedings moved swiftly through the courts. Marcus Webb faced 17 felony charges including impersonating a police officer, kidnapping, extortion, operating a criminal enterprise, and theft. Jake and Tommy each faced 12 felony charges as co-conspirators. The evidence was so overwhelming that all 3 defendants accepted plea agreements rather than risk trial. Marcus received 12 years in state prison. Jake and Tommy each received 8 years, with the possibility of parole after serving 2/3 of their sentences. But the sentences were not the most satisfying part of the resolution. The most satisfying part was watching the transformation of my neighborhood from a place of fear back into a place of community. The fake HOA notices disappeared from front doors. The clipboard-carrying enforcers vanished from the streets. The anxiety that had gripped residents for months melted away like snow in spring sunshine. Neighbors began talking to each other again. Children returned to playing freely in their yards. Mrs. Patterson started hosting coffee mornings on her front porch, where residents could share stories and support each other through the recovery process. The young couple with twins organized a neighborhood barbecue to celebrate the return of normalcy. Families who had been afraid to socialize for months gathered in the park to watch their children play together safely. As for me, I learned something important about the nature of authority and justice. Real authority comes from legitimate sources and serves to protect people, not exploit them. Real justice takes time and follows proper procedures, but it actually works to make communities safer. Marcus Webb had tried to create fake authority for personal gain, using fear and intimidation to control people who trusted what appeared to be legitimate power. But when confronted with real authority exercised properly, his entire operation collapsed like a house of cards. 6 months later, I still work as a corrections officer at the county jail. Occasionally, I see Marcus Webb during my rounds. He is a model prisoner who keeps to himself and causes no trouble. The arrogance and fake authority are gone, replaced by the quiet reality of serving time for serious crimes. Sometimes I wonder if he learned anything from the experience. If he understands that real authority requires real responsibility, and that preying on vulnerable people always leads to consequences. But mostly, I just appreciate the peace that has returned to Maple Grove Estates. The morning coffee on my front porch tastes better when I know my neighbors are safe. The weekend yard work feels more satisfying when I can wave to families playing in their yards without fear. My garden gnome still sits proudly among the flowers. No one has complained about it since Marcus Webb was arrested. After all, there is no real HOA to enforce fake rules. And if another fake authority figure ever tries to intimidate my neighbors, they will discover the same thing Marcus Webb learned. Sometimes the best way to deal with people who abuse fake power is to introduce them to the real thing. Justice served cold is still justice served.